Thanks. I get really nervous before these things, but this is the first time I've ever gotten a standing ovation for just walking on stage. So that is an auspicious start, I think. So thank you. Let's see, how do I get this started? Here we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the present, the future, and then how I think we can get from here to there. And specifically about the tech sector and diversity in it, which is kind of what I spend my time thinking about, and tech's great opportunity divide. So there are two big trends happening now in not just the tech industry, but our country as a whole. The first is an economic trend. The economy of the United States is undergoing a big change, and really tech is at the nexus of it. You may have heard Mark Andreessen's famous quote that software is eating the world. And when he said that, he was talking about different industries, different products, but software is actually eating jobs as well. Science, tech, engineering, and math jobs are the fastest growing category of jobs in the US. And within that segment, over 70% of those jobs involve computing. So tech jobs are really where it's at, driving growth in the US. But it's still hungry. At the rate that we're graduating qualified students to fill these open tech jobs, analysts predict that 1 million jobs in tech will be unfilled by the year 2020, in just about 5 years. So this is really the crux of the 21st century skills gap. It's not that there aren't jobs, but that we have this mismatch between the people that are looking for jobs, the skills they have, and the skills that are required for the open jobs. And a lot of that is in tech. The second trend that I want to talk about is the demography, the demographics of the United States. We're seeing a really big change here as well. Today, minorities actually drive population growth. 90% of population growth comes from minority communities. CODE2040, my organization, gets its name from the fact that in the year 2040, people of color will collectively be the majority in the United States. And 42% of the population will be Black and Latino. I actually was presenting on this elsewhere, and I got a spontaneous round of applause for this, which I thought was interesting. Everybody has a different reaction, but we're excited about it. At the same time that we see this growth in minority groups, we also see that we're left out of the economic growth of the country. So this I found pretty startling when I first saw. The net worth of a white family is 22 times that of a Black family and 15 times that of a Latino family. And the average net worth of a Black family is $5,000. This is also a divide that has doubled in the past 10 years. So over the course of the recession, it actually widened the gap between the net worth of families of color and white families. We're especially, however, when we look at kind of the trends of growth in the economy, minorities are especially left out of tech. So Blacks and Latinos today are about 28% of the population. They're only 9% of tech professionals. Where we're based in the Bay Area, it's actually a bit worse. You get about 7%. And less than 1% of venture-backed tech startups have a Black founder on the team. And I want to pause on this graph for a minute because, when people think about and talk about diversity in tech, it's often referred to as a pipeline problem. And there are various kind of leaks in the pipeline as you go from kindergarten to career. But one that's often overlooked is this jump from the 18% of computer science degrees awarded each year that are earned by Black and Latino students to the industry numbers. So there's an issue with even those students who have made it through the education portion of the pipeline, kind of making it into careers in tech. So this is not good. But it has the potential to be great. And this is what I really want to explain and kind of focus on. So you take these two trends, this new economy with the tremendous growth that we see and open jobs, and this growing portion of the population, and there's actually a real opportunity to connect these two and, I think, once and for all, close the wealth and achievement gap for Blacks and Latinos in the United States. So I'm going to actually kind of rebrand the presentation midstream. And this is not about the opportunity divide. This is really about tech's great opportunity. It's an opportunity for Black and Latino communities. Tech is a path to wealth. The average tech worker earns more than the median household income of a Black family and a Latino family combined. And at the same time, it's a path to stability. So tech enjoys some of the lowest unemployment rates nationwide. And I want to kind of underscore this, particularly that first point. I'll come back to CODE2040 and kind of what we do, but we had a few of our students out over the summer, last summer, and they were riding the Caltrain from Silicon Valley to San Francisco and kind of reflecting on their experience over the summer. And several of them realized that as summer interns, kind of sophomores, juniors in college, they were making more than their parents made. So this is a real opportunity to change the economic trajectory of these individuals, their families, and their communities. And I think that's exciting because this is something that is not widely known in these communities, and it's a shift. So I had a friend in college who was really passionate about education, and we were all doing the job search senior year, and we had a conversation, and I said, "How's it going?" And he said, "I took a job at Morgan Stanley." And I was like, "What? I thought that you were passionate about making a difference in education. Why did you take the job at Morgan Stanley?" And he said, "Well, it's my job to now buy Christmas presents for all of my siblings and cousins. And if I want to be able to do that and actually kind of create these experiences for my family, I need a job where I'm making money." And this, I think what's exciting about tech is it really is the new kind of stable, well-paying career that a lot of these students don't know about. And what's even better is that you can go into tech, you can become a computer scientist, you can be a coder, and you can work on things like education as part of that. So it's a real, I think, not something to be underestimated, that this is a real driver for a lot of students when they're considering kind of what their career opportunities are. This is also an opportunity for tech companies, and I want to be crystal clear that this is not about charity at all. This is actually about necessity. The workforce is changing, the consumer base is changing, and that is going to radically change who's using your products, and it's going to have to change who's building those products as well. I really believe that connecting this growing portion of the population with this growing segment of the economy is the greatest economic opportunity of our time. And it's that because it's about fueling growth of these companies, it's about making them more innovative and our innovation economy more competitive, and it's also about the ability to lift what will be half the population of the country out of poverty. So this is the future of the tech industry. These are some of our students. It's inevitable that, given what the workforce is going to look like, that these are what teams are going to look like, and we hope you'll be in this future of the tech industry. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CODE2040, my organization, and what we do, and what we're doing to help get our students and also our partners in the industry from kind of here, this mentality of the opportunity to divide, to there, this future that we're really excited about. So I started CODE2040 just over 2 years ago. And it came out of not just seeing these sort of stats and numbers that I've laid out, but also my own experience in the industry. So I grew up on the East Coast, and I did not know what computer science was. It never occurred to me that tech was a possible career path until I went out to the Bay Area for graduate school and suddenly was immersed in Silicon Valley and realized that this was a huge engine for economic growth. There was a ton of opportunity here, but there wasn't a lot of awareness in the communities that I had kind of come up in about this opportunity and about how you could get engaged in this segment of the economy. So I ended up working at a tech company for a couple years. I was doing business development, strategy, product development, a bunch of different things, as one does in a startup. And I started going to a lot of industry events, and I would look around and see that there just weren't that many people that looked like me in the room. And so it was that experience of realizing that there was so much opportunity here, but that there was just a kind of misconnection between huge portions of the population and this huge portion of the economy that I thought that we could do something about. So at CODE2040, our vision is to close the wealth and achievement gap for Blacks and Latinos in the US. And we do this by creating pathways to success in the innovation economy. We essentially create programs that find and cultivate Black and Latino technical talent. And we do this kind of hand in hand with our partner companies. So we also help them attract and retain diverse talent. And the idea is that we can kind of blaze pathways in the center of this space so that the students that we work with become leaders. They become visible role models. They become the people who will then be hiring, making product decisions, founding companies. Our flagship program is the CODE2040 Fellows Program. We go out around the country and we recruit students to come together for a summer-long career accelerator. And basically what this looks like is they have internships at tech companies, and then we do a leadership development curriculum with them on the evenings and weekends. So we have workshops, speakers come through, they visit a variety of different tech companies. We do training, technical training. Facebook led a whiteboarding interview workshop for them. LinkedIn led a workshop on how to create an online presence. We do a big hackathon. They get 2 mentors over the course of the summer, and we do networking events. And this is a photo from one of our networking events. That's MC Hammer, Ben Horowitz, and Drew Houston. So they get pretty networked in. It's really, we're all quite jealous of the students by the end of the summer. And our fellows are really rock stars. So 90% of the students that go through our summer program get a full-time offer from their summer employer, and 100% work in tech post-graduation. What's exciting to us, though, is we have a pay-it-forward component to the program. So the students are actually committing to taking their knowledge, their expertise, what they learn, what they're exposed to, and bringing that back to their communities. And they all do it in different ways. We had 4 students from our 2013 class this past summer who went back to their campuses in the fall and realized that there'd never been a hackathon on their campuses, University of Maryland, University of Houston, Virginia Tech, and so they decided to start that. So they took what they had learned from doing an inclusive, diversity-focused hackathon with us over the summer, and they brought it back to campus, and they reached over 400 students that way. We ran a pilot of the program in 2012 with 5 students, and now 2 years later, 2 of those 5 students have actually launched their own startups. And what's particularly exciting to me about that is that these are companies that really spot needs that come from their own experiences. So one of them is launching a company that does real-time reporting on your phone for crime and kind of unsafe events, so that you don't have to wait for something to be kind of broadcast to the police and bounce back out. If you guys remember, on your college campus. I know we had this, you have those blue phones that you're supposed to pick up and call campus police if something wasn't going right. And there's a kind of really long feedback loop there. So they've created this mobile app that allows people to kind of crowdsource and ping each other when stuff isn't going right. The other startup is a platform that allows small minority-owned businesses to get access to financial advising and accounting services, because they found that actually a big barrier to growth for these companies was that these entrepreneurs didn't have finance professionals or accountants in their networks. They didn't know kind of what they needed to do to get bank loans to grow to the next level. So they created a solution for that. So they're rock stars, but they're also lab rats, and this is really important for us. The Fellows Program allows us to learn so much about what is needed to make broad change in the industry. So we have about 20 students go through the Fellows Program over the summer, and we pick their brains, we experiment, and we use the knowledge that we gain from both working with them and from finding them. So we've had 600 students apply to the program. We've had 150 companies express interest in hosting the students. We've placed talent at over 25 companies. And through that process, we actually learn a lot about kind of where the needs are on the company side, where the needs are on the student side, and what's needed to kind of bridge those gaps. So it's through that we're actually able to work on new programming, and we have some programming that we'll announce in a few months coming out this fall that's going to help the 3,000 Black and Latino students in our pipeline understand what it is that they need to do to apply for and get these sorts of jobs. The #1 question that we got when we were out on campuses recruiting students was, what do I need to do to be a good candidate for these sorts of roles? And we found that students weren't aware of a lot of the things that companies were looking for. So they actually may be quite technically talented, but they weren't able to market themselves or present that in a way that companies could recognize. So we're doing some work both on the student side to help the students kind of create portfolios, round out their technical skills, know what a good resume looks like, but also on the company side to help companies understand that there's more than one way to recognize talent. And in a lot of cases, companies are very, very good at recognizing talent that looks a lot like the talent that they already have. A lot of their hiring comes from referrals. A lot of their criteria for jobs comes from people internal to the company. So what we're doing is helping companies expand the criteria that they use to hire so that they can recognize additional talent that will be a good fit for their company. So our vision is a world in which Blacks and Latinos are proportionally represented in all facets of the innovation economy, whether that is technologists, entrepreneurs, professors, lecturers, and I think what's exciting to us is the idea of going out of business. So we would like to create these pathways and equip universities and students and companies with these sorts of tools so that Code 2040 doesn't have to be around. The last thing that we want as an organization is to be a bottleneck where, if you're looking for technical talent of color, you go to Code 2040, and then it's about us being kind of the broker. We want to really make sure that we're equipping students on one side and companies on the other to kind of make these connections directly all around the country. So we have some help, and I think this is really important also because we really can't do what we do without the companies that are committed to these sorts of issues. So this is kind of a sampling of the companies that have supported us and that we work with for everything from running workshops, donating space over the summer, sponsors. And again, I think it goes back to the fact that for the organizations that we partner with, this is not charity. This is about them laying the groundwork for their future growth. So with that, I really just want to invite everyone to kind of join this movement. You're in it, whether you like it or not. This is the future, and part of what we want to do is create a space that is inclusive for people to engage in these issues and be a part of kind of hastening this positive change. Thank you. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
If you have questions, please find your way to one of the microphones in the aisles, please. Laura, let's start with this quick question coming from Twitter. It's an interesting question. And the question is, how do tech jobs / skills mesh with Black and Latino cultures?
So, I think this actually in part comes back to this idea of software eating the world. The really amazing thing about tech is that it's everywhere. And I think that's one of the things that is not necessarily clear to students as they're making choices about kind of what they want to study and how they see their career path. There's the kind of stereotypical image of what a computer scientist looks like and does, and that it's somebody kind of coding with headphones on, at 3 a.m. in the dark. And that can be a turnoff to students who want to engage in their communities, who have interests and passions that they want to pursue that are outside of tech. And one of the things that we've seen really resonate with students and get them excited is to help them understand how these sorts of skills are transferable across a bunch of different industries. Yes, there's working in that kind of typical tech startup, but there's also things that you can do in music with tech, or in these kind of industries that are more traditionally kind of the siren calls for these communities. We tend to want to be what we see, and a lot of the role models in communities of color are rappers, musicians, basketball players, actors. These are great careers, but it's really hard to succeed in these sorts of careers. And tech provides an opportunity for students to engage with a lot of their different interests in a much more accessible way. So I think that's how it meshes.
Great, a lot of love on Twitter, people trying to figure out how they can offer support here in San Francisco and beyond. Let's take a question right across the room, please.
Hi. First of all, thank you. My question is pretty similar to the one that was just asked, but my background's in science, and there's all these programs to get more women into science, and I was kind of curious about how you get basically another language to be inspiring to this group where it seems completely foreign.
What we've found has opened up our students' eyes is exposure to people who are working in the industry, so that they get a sense of what these careers actually look like. So a big part of what we do is just put students in front of people who have these different sorts of jobs and roles. And it's actually a big part of why we have the commitment for our students to give back, because a lot of what they do is they go and they speak to students in high school and middle school and just show them, here's what it looks like to be working on these sorts of problems, to have this sort of job, and kind of demystify a bunch of it. I think another kind of myth about what these jobs look like is that they're very solitary and isolated, and we know that there's a ton of teamwork, and that can be really appealing to students that they don't realize is a part of this career. So just having those touch points, those interactions where you can demystify at all different levels. For our students, a big part of the focus is putting them in front of entrepreneurs so they can understand, what does it look like to actually start a company? Is this something that I want to do? Is it something that makes sense for me? And all of that is really just about demystifying. And I think what we've seen that's exciting is that that is true across the board, whether or not you come from the same background as the students or you look like the students. We have mentors and speakers in our program that come from all sorts of different backgrounds and have had all sorts of different career trajectories. And anybody can really sit down and just share their story in a way that can inspire a student to pursue this line of work.
Quick question coming from Twitter. Is it hard to sell these students to want to engage in this experience? And have you ever experienced challenges with families, et cetera?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. We actually will get on the phone with families a lot. For a lot of students, jumping into the tech scene, particularly working at a startup, we do a lot of work with startups, feels very risky. And for the Fellows program, it's just a summer internship, and they are getting super plugged in. You've seen the numbers. 100% of them get great jobs on upon graduation. But for a lot of students, particularly students from certain areas of the country where their whole family has been living in a geographic area for a really long time, nobody from their high school or their college is kind of leaving the state to work. There's a big kind of leap of faith that they have to take to even just come to our program's based, the Fellows program is based in California, even just come to the Bay Area for the summer. And so we actually do get on the phone with families pretty often. And what that really is just being a human on the other end of the phone line who's like, hey, I'm going to take care of your kid. It's going to be okay. And that, in a lot of cases, is really just what families need to hear. They really just want the best for their student, and they're worried, as I think any of us would be, about their child kind of going off to thousands of miles away and not having a safety net and a support. And I think that is a big part of the advantage that CODE2040 offers for our students over the summer is we are that support. We call CODE2040 a family, and it really feels that way over the summer, and I think that really helps get buy-in from a lot of their actual families that we talk to.
Great. We have another question over here.
So I'm just wondering, within the tech industry, how are you working with companies to create a more inclusive environment that feels more welcoming to minorities or women?
Yeah, so this is, I think of what we do in kind of three buckets. There's working with students on one side, there's working with companies on the other side, and there's building bridges between them is kind of the third area. And working with companies is one of the things that I'm most excited about. There's, I think, a lot that can be done to shift both hiring practices and kind of inclusion in the workplace to make sure that whether it's our students or other people of color get there, that they feel kind of welcomed and included. There's a lot of actually really interesting research on this around women, not as much around people of color, but I think there's a lot of parallels. If you describe your workplace in a job ad, so a lot of ads for working at tech startups will actually go through and talk about the perks and try to get people excited. And if you talk about things like foosball and beer versus like yoga and kombucha, I don't know, you get actually a different pool of applicants that apply. And so I think, and that, that's for the hiring process, but it's true once you get inside as well. Like, do you actually have yoga and kombucha, or do you have beer and foosball? And what are the posters on the wall? Is it all kind of Star Wars posters that appeal to a particular set, and there's nothing that other people from other backgrounds or communities would have had in their bedrooms growing up. There are those subtle things that send signals about who's welcome and who fits in, kind of who the in-group is and who the out-group is, that are not racist per se, and nobody makes a decision about putting up I'm picking on Star Wars. I have no idea if that is like statistically accurate, so please don't quote me, but there's nobody who chooses to put the Star Wars poster up is like, oh, we're going to exclude the people who didn't watch Star Wars growing up. But those are the unintended consequences. And so a lot of what we try to do is just raise awareness about how there are seemingly innocuous choices that you can make that actually make a difference in how people feel included or excluded, and sometimes unconsciously.
Great. We have another question right over here.
Thank you for sharing your story. My name is Landon Young, and I'm the Director of Innovation at William Jewell College in Kansas City. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the role of higher education in educating underrepresented groups on technology.
Yeah, so huge. You know, I think there's a lot of different places in the pipeline that are just ripe for disruption and doing this work. We really believe that higher education is a really big part of this. Some of it is making computer science more accessible. There's a tradition in kind of the sciences in college, which for those who kind of major in these fields, this may resonate, of having weeder courses that are designed to try to get people out who aren't, you know, hitting a certain GPA or what have you. And actually, I think that philosophy is fundamentally wrong. So the question should be, how do we include as many people as possible in engaging in this sort of learning and these sorts of subjects? And there are examples of places, colleges, where that's been made a priority. So Harvey Mudd in Southern California is a great example of this, where the president of the university is a computer scientist, and she decided that she wanted to get, just radically change the numbers of who was in that major. And she was particularly focused on women. I think these numbers are definitely wrong, and this is on the internet, so I'm sorry, but it was something like 10% were majoring in CS. And so she restructured the intro course. And instead of having all of the students in the same course, so that you had students who had been coding since they were 8 and students who did not know what coding was sitting next to each other, she created levels. But she didn't do it in a way that was like, you know, basic and advanced. It was like green and gold or something like that. And she had then a very kind of welcoming and supportive environment in the class that was directed at students with no exposure. And the number of the balance of students in the major went up to something like 40% women. And this is a lot of what we see with students of color as well. If they have that first kind of supportive experience in coding and CS, a lot of times they fall in love with it, and that will give them a lot of the grit and resilience and perseverance necessary to kind of stick with it. But you have to have a good first exposure, and I think that higher ed can do a lot towards making that happen. The other piece I would say is that a lot of the curriculum in schools in computer science is very academic and is not as much about real-world applications. So we get a lot of feedback from companies that the students that come to them don't have the types of skills and exposure that they're looking for. And so companies end up prioritizing things like, have you had an internship before? Because then I know that you can actually do the work, as opposed to just kind of what's your GPA, how did you do on your problem sets? And so that's another place where schools can really differentiate themselves, I think, by having a lot more applications of computer science and software development, as opposed to just an academic bent that would really set students up well to get these sorts of jobs. Because at this point, there's even companies that kind of pick target schools and go run their own kind of boot camps, weekend-long boot camps, to try to cultivate students who meet their needs. These are large tech companies with a lot of hiring needs because they're not seeing schools deliver on that type of talent.
Great. We'll do two last questions, starting here.
Sure. I'm wondering, here in the Midwest, according to the studies, the population in the high school students are first generation students, where they are the first ones in the family going to high school or even college. So how do you handle situations when they feel that they are the main providers for the family? And then what else do you do to involve parents? Maybe some of them, they don't have the educational level or understanding of why it's important to go to a technology field. And my last question, are you considering branching out from the Silicon Valley CODE2040, like to the Midwest, for example?
So I think the kind of element of the problem and therefore the solution is different depending on where in the pipeline that you focus. So I think kind of the three kind of ways to think about it are exposure, instruction, and access. CODE2040, the Fellows Program, is really focused on access. So how do we help students? It's kind of that last bit of exposure of, what is the range of careers once you've already decided that you're kind of interested in computer science, then how do you gain access to them? There's really important places for exposure and instruction as well. And particularly for middle school, high school, exposure is extremely important, and there are some great organizations working on that issue. If you expose students early, they're more likely to consider tech as a career option and kind of get a sense of what the lay of the land looks like. On the instruction piece, one thing that I will mention, it's a little bit out of scope, but I think it's cool to think about, is the role that this rise of coding boot camps plays in being able to train people who are kind of under, and misemployed, who are already out of the traditional education system, and so this is a way for them to kind of plug back in and retrain. We really feel like for the students that we're working with, that access piece is the most important. In terms of expansion, the new program that we're rolling out this fall will actually take place in different locations all around the country. So we see, as I mentioned, the Fellows Program is this lab where we kind of learn what's needed. And as we roll out this programming, which will hit the 3,000 students in our pipeline who are located all over the country, we'll be doing things elsewhere. So maybe we'll be back in Omaha. We'll see. Thank you.
Great. We have one last question over here.
So are you doing anything with outreach to the Native American community as well? I was thinking about this. My daughter's boyfriend is Ojibwe, and he's extremely bright. He's on a Gates Millennium Scholarship and could go to college anywhere he wants. But he stays in Minneapolis so he can stay on Ojibwe tribal lands and stay connected to his tribe. It's very important to him. So, how the Native American community is really suffering in poverty and are very isolated in many cases. So how can we help that community as well? And if you're not, look into that community, because that's an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, so this is really important too. We focus on Black and Latino communities because of those growth numbers, but that's not to say that these are the only communities that could use this type of programming or support, and we're actually often asked to think about whether it's other racial or ethnic groups, other industries. So a lot of people that work in other industries that see this lack of representation are interested in the CODE2040 model. And kind of the short answer is we can't do it all, and we wish we could. But we're really excited to share kind of our model and our learnings, and expand where we can, and then help other organizations to kind of pop up to fill other needs that we can't fill.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for a fantastic talk from Laura.